Blink and hold still. Are you absolutely sure the world outside your eyes is real and not something your brain is stitching together in real time? Because there's a documented case where that stitching started to fail, and a Stanford doctor wrote everything down. A 17-year-old kid from San Diego decided to stay awake as long as humanly possible. And by day 4, he looked at a road sign and saw a person waving at him. That was just the beginning. His name was Randy Gardner, not a scientist, not a soldier, not some secret lab experiment, just a teenager who wanted to win a high school science fair. His project idea was simple, almost stupidly simple. Don't sleep for as long as possible. Word spread fast, and when a Stanford sleep researcher heard about it, he showed up in person to observe Randy and record what happened. Because if someone is going to push the human brain past its limit, you want witnesses, notes, data. And what makes this story creepy isn't just the number of hours. It's what happens to your perception when the brain can't get what it needs. At first, it looks normal. The first 3 days were manageable. Randy was tired, irritable, short-tempered. His memory started slipping. Little things at first, names, details, the kind of fog you've probably felt after pulling an all-nighter. Nothing supernatural. His brain was still holding the line, still keeping the world clean, stable, predictable. Then day 4 arrived, and the line started to wobble. Randy looked at a road sign, and he saw a person, not a shadow, not a vague shape. A person standing there, waving at him. The sign wasn't moving, nobody else was around, but the image was so vivid, so convincing, that if you were in his body, you would have sworn it was real. And here's the part that gets under my skin. That hallucination didn't come with a warning label. It didn't feel like my brain is glitching. It felt like reality, like the world did a quiet rewrite, and he was the only one who noticed. By day 5, the fog arrived. Not outside, inside. A thick mental haze that makes thoughts feel heavy, like you're trying to walk through water. Time starts to smear. Focus breaks apart, and then things start showing up. Randy began seeing things that weren't there, and hearing sounds from nowhere. And I don't mean I thought I heard my phone buzz. I mean the brain starts filling in blanks, aggressively, because the brain hates empty space. It hates uncertainty. So when it can't process the world normally, it starts improvising. It patches holes with whatever it can grab. Faces, voices, movement, meaning. Reality becomes a suggestion, and the border between what's outside you and what's coming from inside you starts to dissolve, slowly, quietly, until you can't tell which side you're on. By day 7, it crossed into something stranger. Randy started talking to people who weren't there, and the Stanford doctor kept writing every detail. Randy would sit there and have full conversations with invisible people. He'd answer questions nobody asked. He'd laugh at jokes nobody told. Sometimes he'd pause, like he was listening to someone speak, and then respond. And the creepiest part is that his body looked awake. He could walk, talk, react. But his brain had started sleeping anyway. Not fully, in pieces, in fragments, like a building running on emergency power, turning off floors one by one, without telling anyone. That's what sleep deprivation does. Your consciousness isn't a single switch. It's a system, a network. And when the system is starving, it starts shutting down parts of itself, with or without your permission. So you're awake, but you're not fully online. You're present, but pieces of you are missing, and you don't even realize which pieces until reality starts acting weird. Then comes day 11. Randy finally collapsed into sleep. 264 hours without sleep, 11 days, a world record. He slept for about 14 hours and woke up. And on the surface, it looked like he was fine, like it was over, like the brain snapped back and everything reset. But here's the detail most people don't expect. In the years after, Randy reportedly struggled with severe insomnia. As if the experiment didn't just exhaust him, it altered something. Like the mechanism that draws the boundary between sleep and wakefulness got scratched and never worked the same way again. And whether you call that damage or stress or a long-term consequence, it fits the most unsettling idea in all of this. Sleep isn't rest. Sleep is maintenance. Think about that. You don't sleep because you're lazy. You sleep because your brain has a nightly job it must finish, or the system starts breaking in real time, and it cleans. During sleep, the brain takes out the trash. It clears waste. It sorts memory. It strengthens useful connections and trims the noise. It restores balance. It literally services itself, like an engine that has to cool down and recalibrate. And when you don't sleep, your brain doesn't just keep working harder, it starts trying to sleep while you're awake. That's where the hallucinations come from. Not just you're losing it, but your brain forcing tiny sleep events, microsleeps, right through your waking life. Seconds-long shutdowns you might not even notice. A blink that lasts too long, a moment where your eyes are open, but your awareness drops out. And when that happens, your reality tears, just a little. Then it gets stitched back together. Fast, messy, good enough for you to keep going. And you believe it, because the brain's #1 priority isn't truth. It's stability. It wants a continuous story, a coherent world, a smooth film reel. So it edits, it splices, it fills gaps. And sometimes it fills gaps with people on road signs, waving at you. Here's the part that feels like straight-up mysticism, except it isn't. Every night when you sleep, the boundary between dreaming and waking gets erased, and every morning it gets redrawn. You wake up, and the world looks solid, normal, reliable. But what if that's not because the world is solid? What if it's because the line is fresh? A new boundary painted over chaos. A clean outline traced over something that never really stops moving. And when you stay awake long enough, you start seeing the underside. You start seeing the seams. You start seeing how much of reality is actually a deal your brain makes with itself. Every single day. So now I can't unthink this question. Maybe reality isn't what exists. Maybe reality is what your brain can assemble before you open your eyes. And Randy, whether he meant to or not, watched that assembly process fail. Not all at once, but piece by piece. Day 4, a person where there was none. Day 5, the fog inside his head. Day 7, conversations with invisible people. Day 11, the body finally shutting down, and a Stanford doctor sitting there the whole time, writing it down. So let me ask you something. Seriously, have you ever been so sleep-deprived that the world started to feel off? Like sounds were too sharp, or time moved wrong, or you saw something in the corner of your eye that vanished the second you focused on it? If you have, type "line" in the comments. Because if you want, I'll tell you another real documented story where the boundary between sleep and waking got thin, and someone caught what was hiding underneath. And tonight, when you finally close your eyes, pay attention to one thought. You're not just resting, you're letting your brain redraw the line so the world can look real again in the morning. De Clea.